I'm the voice of Knight Industry 2000's microprocessor, KITT for easy reference, KIT if you prefer.
It's all about Knight Rider when I have the great pleasure of watching Season 1 episode White Bird with no other than Catherine Hickland. Catherine played the wonderful Stevie Mason, both in this episode, in the Season 2 episode Let It Be Me, and in the Season 4 episode The Scent of Roses. I look so much forward to hear about Catherine Hickland's memories regarding this very, very memorable episode. Enjoy.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Catherine. This is going to be so much fun.
It is going to be fun. Oh, it's in my ear. I've got my ear. I'm using new technology, new AirPods. Is the lighting okay?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you look fantastic. You always
Is it too much, or do you want me to turn the lighting down? I just want it to be what you need it to be.
You look amazing. Just as I remember you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
From our meetup.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's so good to see you also. How have you been?
Fantastic. I really had the best Christmas ever. I mean, it was so peaceful and so great. I had my best friends in. I'm excited. I have my glasses here, but I don't think I'm going to need them because I can see everything so well.
You can see everything that's happening because in a minute I'm going to start up the episode.
This is such a cool idea. And I was reading all the posts, comments the other day, like when I put how people are loving that interview and they love that format. A lot of people mention that.
Yeah, they do. Usually they don't like when I speak. And actually I don't either.
Let's do this. I'm super excited.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So am I. I must say, just give me a second here. I hope that this will work.
You can have all the time you want. This is our date.
Yes, it is.
We're on a date.
Yes, we're on a date now, watching White Bird. Catherine, welcome. This is fantastic. And yeah, it is hitting off up here. You're center stage right from the beginning. Yeah. I want to ask you the first question. We haven't got the sound on, but still, what comes and what is already on is the Knight Rider theme, and we have the score from Don Peake in this episode. What are your thoughts regarding this? The themes, the theme and the score.
Well, when you say the theme, what do you mean by that exactly? The story?
I think the music, the theme for it. Yeah.
Well, Don Peake is a great person, and he's a fantastic musician and writer, and he did the most fantastic job scoring this episode. And I don't even know if in these days now, since this was 40 years ago, and these days I really don't know if they take the time to do episodic television the way they did back in the 80s. Every single thing he chose for this episode lent itself to the emotion that the audience was being led to feel. And so if you ever watch something without music, which people don't usually have the opportunity to do, just hear two people talking without music in the background, it is so stark night and day, because the music actually transports you emotionally to another place. And so the music is so crucial to any scene in anything. So to that end, Don Peake did a brilliant job of scoring this. I think he did a great job with all the Knight Riders he did, but this one in particular had that harp. Remember the harp? You would hear the Knight Rider theme and harp, and you would hear the other things with a harp. You don't hear a harp that often. It's a very angelic instrument. And so when you hear it, it makes you pay attention. It's like all of a sudden, whatever you're doing, you're just focused on what you're watching. So the brilliance of Don Peake in this is definitely worthy to be mentioned.
Yeah, and in this scene, you're playing. I think it's Don Galloway. You're playing opposite.
Yeah.
How did you relate? Were there any time on set to relate to the other actors?
No, I don't remember. I remember doing this scene, of course, but I don't remember getting to know Don Galloway at all because everything was under the gun time-wise. Because we had to shoot so many pages a day, and so that you're kind of thrown on the set. You have one run through, and then you shoot it. So not a lot of time to get to know people that you only have one scene with. If you have a lot of scenes, it's different because there's setup time in between shots, and so you would get to know them. But our scene was fast and furious.
Do you remember the office scene we just saw? Was that on location or was that on a soundstage?
I think it was on location, if I recall. Yeah, I think it was on location. Yeah. In an office, maybe even a police station.
Okay,
I think.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. Any details regarding how you got the role? You were David Hasselhoff's girlfriend at this point in time, close to be fiancé. How did that all work out?
Well, I think I told this story in your other really wonderful interview we did together, which I thank you so much for because it was so beautifully done. And I really enjoyed watching it. And I don't usually enjoy watching myself. I very rarely ever watch anything I ever do just because until I learned how to watch myself in the third person where I'm not going to be so judgmental because it's like watching somebody else, not me. And I had to teach myself how to do that because, I didn't see 3/4 of my work. I didn't want to pick on myself. Once I started watching in the third person, I began to appreciate a good performance. And I also began to be able to give myself notes as an actor who would give notes to another person, not me. And so it helped me a lot. So that's important. At Whitebird, of course, David and I had been together since we were both on soap operas. This was, his first big break and the one I think that made him. And to this day, I know Baywatch was huge, but it's not Knight Rider. It didn't have the heart and soul that this show had. And so I think that this was like a meant to be thing for him. And Whitebird, the idea of Whitebird was born in my mind. And I wrote like a 20-page synopsis and had David give it to Glenn Larson. And then they liked the idea, so then they gave that to a scriptwriter named Virginia Aldridge. And she did a fantastic job of executing that script. So I came up with the idea, the situation, the character, and she took it all from there. And it's a lot. So that's how that came to be, just based on the fact I told you in the last interview that I'd seen a Starsky and Hutch episode when I was young, and it was very similar in emotion, character emotion, dealing with love, which the reason I love this so much is because to this day, I have grown men come up to me and say, "You were my first crush. I watched Knight Rider when I was a boy. I was in love with you. I had a crush on you. It was my first experience dealing with my emotions about love and all that sort of thing." And so, for me, that is the greatest compliment because I experienced that when I was young watching actors like the Starsky and Hutch episode. It was huge impact on my young emotional self. So I'm so grateful that even though they made me audition for the part, because I thought, oh, well, I'll get to play this part because I was on a soap opera. It's not like I was an unknown actress. But no, they made me audition for it. And I was waiting to go in. April Webster was the casting director on Universal Lot. And I was waiting with a lot of girls that looked like me in the waiting room to go in and read for the part. And I was very nervous because I thought, what if I don't get this? I don't think I'll be able to watch this. It will tear my heart out. So I was really happy that I got it. And I think that it was meant to be. That's all. I just don't know if it would have been the same if anyone else played it because it meant so much to me.
Yeah, the question is if it would have brought the same back in or to the screen for David, because playing opposite you would probably do him some good in the emotional part of this story as well.
Oh, I think he was fantastic in all of these episodes. He was great in the part period. I thought that he was born to play the role of Michael Knight, and I don't believe in coincidences. I am a very faithful spiritual girl, and I believe that God does put us exactly where we're supposed to be at what time, no matter what's going on, whether it's good, whether it doesn't feel so good. It's just part of the story that is ours. And so I think that he was meant to play that part. I was meant to play that part. And he was excellent in all of these episodes that we did together, because he really brought so much emotion to it and allowed himself to be seen with tears. And, that's not, a lot of men don't want to do that. And at that time, now today, everybody's much softer, but it's, it's to be the hero of the show and see that kind of raw emotion was kind of rare. And so I applaud him for that, because it also made me better.
Now we see you in Kit along with David. We have to talk a bit about Kit as well. You have your own Kit replica, is that correct?
I do. I've had that car for about 15 years. I bought it from a guy named Gary in North Carolina. And it was so funny because Steve Fawcett, who's a big fan of the show and a friend of David's. Yeah, and he we had been at a Knight Rider convention here in Las Vegas. This is 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago. And that's where I met everybody. And I had all of these people over to my home. There were 60 of us at my house, and I had this lunch. It was so special. And Steve, I said, I forgot how much I love that car. I want one. And so I said, I need to find one. And he said, well, I'll keep an eye out for you. And at some point he wrote me and he said, I found someone that's selling their car, and here's his email address. And so I wrote him, and he didn't believe it was me. So he thought, actually it was April 1st. So it was April Fool's Day when I wrote him, and I didn't realize that. Not that it would have made any difference, but I didn't realize that. And he said, haha, very funny. Who is this? Because I told him my history with the show and that I wanted to buy the car and I wanted to come see it first. So I was going to have to go I lived in New York City at the time, but I also had my home here. And so I was just about to leave New York to move here full time in Las Vegas. So I said, I'm going to come from New York to North Carolina to see the car, talk it over, right? So, and he would not believe that it was me. He was a big fan of the show. So he said, I'm going to ask you some questions that only Catherine Hickland would know. I said, okay, this ought to be pretty easy. So he starts asking me questions and I'm answering. And then he starts getting me confused with David's second wife, Pamela. And I could tell from the questions that he was getting confused and asking me. And I said, well, that I don't know the answer to, because that is wife number 2. I said, but if you stay in my lane, I'm going to do great. And so he's like, oh, I think, I don't know if it was intentional or what, but he got it right away that it was me. And so so I flew maybe 2 days later. And I did this really funny thing on Facebook. I had this little video camera. You have to understand, this is before we had cell phones on cameras on our cell phones, video on our cell phones. So I had this little flip camera, this video camera. And so I was telling everybody, I'm going to North Carolina because I met somebody and I am so excited because I'm going to meet him for the very first time. And I want to take you on my journey with me. And so everybody thought I was going to meet a guy. Yeah. And so everybody was on Facebook was hanging on to this journey minute to minute to minute because they wanted to see who I was going to meet. And so finally, this many hours journey, getting on the plane, the flight, getting there, getting the car, having somebody drive me, going up finally up the street. And I'm getting all excited. I'm so excited. I'm about to meet him. My gosh, I hope he's all I want him to be. And it was kind of that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, the camera, I pan it over and you see the scanner on Kit going back and forth, and everyone is like, oh my gosh, it's the car. Because they didn't know I was buying a car, right?
Awesome.
And then so I've just made it kind of fun for everybody and for me too. And that's how I acquired my Kit car. And I've had him for, I'd say 15 years, maybe 16.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have a scene here with Patricia McPherson. I know we covered Patricia just a bit as well when we talked this summer, but I don't know if you have anything to add. I remember this episode. This was the 9th episode to air in Danish television, and in the first 8. It had kind of built up to Michael and Bonnie, maybe not getting together, but Michael was fond of Bonnie. So I actually remember, I was 10 years old when I watched this episode, and I wouldn't say devastated, but I was a bit sad that this Michael-Bonnie thing was interrupted by a certain blonde lady. You know who?
Me.
Yeah. So at that point, you know, I was 10 years old, so I didn't really get the emotion of being really in love like Michael was here. So yeah.
Oh, so it's like people that watch soap operas. They get really attached, and that's a thing I know. That's something I know a thing or two about. But people get really attached to characters and their relationships. So when something comes in to threaten the relationship, they have a really strong emotional reaction to it, and that sounds like what happened to you.
Yeah.
I think that the audience really did like Bonnie and Michael Knight together, but the story kind of overrode that in a way because, you know, they belonged to each other in another lifetime.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that overrode. That's why the script was so brilliant, because it overrode the feelings that you have, and I think I probably won you over because you seem to like me today. So
I do, Kat, yeah.
So it can happen, but I was devastated when they let Patricia go because I thought that she and David had so much chemistry together. Yeah. And, you know, I think maybe I don't know what the reasons are. I think at the time they wanted to get television was real TNA, and you know what that means, right? I don't want to say it. Yeah. So in the 80s, it was all about the TNA. And that's why Suzanne Summers, it was a big hit on Three's Company. And, you know, if you looked at all the shows, there was lots of TNA. And I think that Patricia wasn't enough TNA for them. And they wanted to bring someone really glamorous in. And so I think that's one of the reasons that she was replaced, because it certainly wasn't her work. Yeah. And I thought Patricia was beautiful in her very own way. I just thought that I was so upset about that character being let go as a viewer, because I watched the show too. Yeah. And the other reason I think that maybe they did that is because that, I think, was the biggest reason. And the other reason is because they didn't want, at that time, although it's not a bad idea, is to have these two characters with so much chemistry, because they thought maybe all the guest stars that came in would be affected by that. Possibly. I mean, I think. Yeah. But I just loved her. I thought she was a great, wonderful actress in the role. She was perfect in the role. And I missed her when she left. Yeah.
You're in Kit now with David. How did that work with all the lighting and the car being towed? Can you remember how was it?
Oh yeah, in the car? I remember it like it was yesterday, because we're being towed by a big utility truck, and so we're actually being towed, all four wheels on the ground, and so it's staggeringly weird, because this giant utility truck is in front of you, and there's about 10 people looking at you, because there's the script supervisor, the director, the cinematographer, maybe 7 people are on, the lighting directors, the focus puller. I mean, everybody is on this truck, and the lights are staggeringly bright, because the truck is a fair amount away from you, of the whole length of the front of the car, which that car was very long in the front. Yeah. And all these people are looking at you, and these lights are just blinding. And, and I remember thinking, this is so weird, because I was so used to being on soap operas at that point for so many years. And We didn't ever go on like location. We didn't have, moving parts, or, we just did our scenes, and five cameras would follow us. And so it was really different. So that's what I remember about shooting scenes in the car, is having all these people staring right at you and the lights being really bright in your face, and having to just forget all that and become this character and remember your lines and enough. Because the trick about acting is this, at least for me, in my way of thinking, is just knowing your lines so well that they just become a part of you. And you don't have to think about anything else except being in the moment, who you are, who they are, and believing that you're her and that he's him. And that forgetting that we're married in real life, or we're boyfriend and girlfriend. It was very interesting, and it was a really good exercise for me. But the thing about acting is you have to be so completely fluid and not be thinking about your lines. That's why I always tell people, just know your lines inside and out. If while you're at it, know theirs too, because then you can just forget the lines and simply react and feel and be. So that's how it was working on this episode, especially in the car because of all the distractions.
Okay, we just saw a wonderful turbo boost. I think one of the best of the entire show. Jack Gill was probably in charge of that. I know he was in charge of a lot of things also in this episode. I was wondering, we saw that scene earlier where David comes into your apartment and you kind of hit him with a baseball bat or something like that.
Yes.
Was there any rehearsal? How did you work with the stunt crew regarding that scene, or how did that work?
Oh yes, there's always a stunt man on set when you're going to do anything physical, because they want to make sure nobody gets hurt. And I told them not to worry. I hit him at home with a baseball bat all the time. I had lots of practice. I'm just kidding. But yes, there's always a stunt person on set when you're going to do that. And so they teach you how to take a fall, how to hit them so that you don't really hit them, but because the camera angle is everything. And when you're slapping somebody or conking somebody over the head with something, it has to be perfect so that they can do a sound effect, and everything has to be right. So the stuntmen are super valuable, not just to do all the stunts with the cars, but and the actors, but for anything like this as well. Yeah, it was great. And Jack Gill, brilliant. And I love his wife, Morgan Brittany, too. But Jack, what a special person. And he was so good, and still is. I mean, he's still, doing all these films. He's probably, in my mind, the best stuntman ever, because look, he's still working today more than ever on big things. So I'm happy for him.
Fantastic. You get to go to a lot of locations as well. This is the Foundation Retreat. Do you remember anything about this location? For how long were you filming? Were you filming there? Things like that.
Well, we usually took about 6 days to film an entire episode, maybe 5. If you were lucky, you could get a 6th day. This location I remember very well. It was in Pasadena, and it was a big mansion. Oh, this location. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was thinking about this one. It was actually outside of LA, and it was a cabin, just like it's the cabin you see in the establishing shot in the beginning. And I remember getting out of the car when we first got to the location and thinking, this is cool. I'd love to live in a place like this, because it just was out of the way, and see the fireplace there. It was very romantic, and stone over the fireplace. I was very excited by this location. And then, of course, all the things that went on behind the house. And but yes, I remember. It's so funny because I do have an impeccable memory. I have a photographic memory, actually. So as I'm watching this, and I've only seen this maybe a few times over the last 40 years, maybe once when it came out and once after that. So I'm looking at this, and I remember every single second of it. I remember what was happening during the scene. I remember where everybody was standing. I remember starting the scene, losing myself in the scene. I remember everything about this because she's trying to, as I recall, get him to say something. But she doesn't know what she's trying to get him to say. So it's, again, the audience is in on something where she's saying, you know, is it you? Why do you seem so familiar? You know, that kind of thing. Now we're on another scene. And this scene is where you hear Whitebird almost in its entirety for the first time. And that was our theme. And that's the name of the show, Whitebird, that episode. So this right here, I remember as we're looking at it in real time, it was going to be the first time that I had to do a stunt ever. And so as I walk out of the scene right there and knowing that I'm going to be shot, and my stunt woman, her name is Debbie Porter, and you look her up on Facebook, Debbie Porter. She was my stunt woman for everything I ever did after this. And on the show I was on, Capital, she was my double because I played twins on that show. So, of course, you can see it's so interesting was now Kit has just told David or Michael that to get me out, and he tells me to run. And then they cut to Kit, and now they will cut to my stunt woman. There she is, boom, and that roll. And I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, it was really, and then boom, they cut, and it's me again. So it's just, they did such a good job of the magic of editing there.
Is that your stunt woman, or is that you being thrown into the car?
That was me being thrown into the car, yes.
The seat, do you remember? Was that lying down? It looks as if the seat is almost lie down.
Yeah, it's as far back as it goes. And I remember being tossed into the car, and I thought, I felt like a bag of potatoes. Everything happened so fast. I was young though, so you know, I could take it, the abuse, as they say.
Now we're at the hospital, and you're just lying there. Any preparations for a scene like this?
No, because I just had to be very still and without any emotion, because she's out of it or in a coma, one or the other. And he had to do all the heavy lifting in this scene, and he did it very well. And so it was great not to have to say anything, just to be there. It's always my favorite when I don't have to say anything. I can just be there. So that's that. I must sleep with my mouth open, because I'm looking at this now and my mouth is open. I might have even fallen asleep there. I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember, was there, during the show, was there any problems with the cars, with the kit cars? Or did everything just work as expected? Well, you know, the cars, there were several of them, and for each had a different purpose. And so they had a shop that was specifically to repair the cars, work on the cars, undamage the cars. So that shop was in play all the time. Sorry if the camera's moving, but my cat is rubbing up against my computer. But the shop for Kit was always had one or two cars in the shop, if not more. They were constantly, so that if a car went out of rotation, they could put another one in. But each car almost had a separate function. One was for stunts, one was for close-ups, one was for, you know, driving. So it was really interesting. Kit had his own team, you know. It was great. Yeah. You were with David for his entire 4 years on Knight Rider. Yes. Do you remember what was Kit to David Hasselhoff? Was Kit just a prop, as you would think a normal car would be, or how did he think about Kit and his success on Knight Rider? Well, that's a really good and interesting question, because I think he loved that car. I personally loved that car because it was the magic of the two of them together that made the show so special. You know, like Harry and Tonto, or any duo that is heroic. I mean, they were half the success of the show equally. He as the actor, Kit, and William Daniels as Kit,
So it was a 50-50 thing, I think, so the car was in the car. There's nothing like this car. Nothing. I mean, we had the General Lee on Dukes of Hazzard, and we had other cars, and there were other famous movie cars, but Kit was in a class of his own because he was a talking, sleek, sexy black car with a sassy attitude that could do anything. And so it was really amazing, for Glenn Larson to come up with this concept. And so it actually nearly made the role of Michael Knight actor-proof because the car had so much personality. But fortunately, David and the car had a magic chemistry, and that's what made this show so successful. And I think he really loved that car, without question. Yeah.
Did you know Glenn Larson?
Yes, of course. And he was so successful. Oh my gosh, when you think of the shows that he had on television in the 80s, all at the same time, or if not at the same time, in succession, one or the other. He was just a hit-making machine. And yet, when you met him, it was interesting because he had been, when he was younger, a musician. He was in a famous group. Let me think of the name of it. You might know it, but let me just test my memory. The Four Preps. How's that?
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
Told you I have a photographic memory. He was in a group called the Four Preps. So he was actually a performer. And I don't know how, because I never found out or asked, how he went from that to producer extraordinaire and the hitmaster of the 80s. I mean, he and Don Belisario, who had Magnum PI and the A-Team, I think. Oh, that was Stephen Cannell. I mean, Stephen Cannell, Don Belisarius, and Glenn Larson owned television in the 80s. If it wasn't one of those three, you were nowhere. I mean, they had every hit there was. So he was pretty interesting. Kind of hard to get to know. Not kind of, very hard to get to know. I didn't spend a lot of time around him, but later at these conventions that we go to now, I got to spend some time with him, and it was really nice because it was 30-something years after the fact. And like I said before, when you're just you, it's different than when you're an actress on the set, because there's a weird something that is there when you're an actress on the set and the producers on the set, and you just, there's no room to be, getting close. It just doesn't happen. And so it was nice to get to know him later at the convention. Yeah.
If we talk a bit about how it was being on set, early mornings, late evenings, 5-6 days, how did that all work out? Did you stay in David? I guess he had a wagon or something like that for himself.
Oh yes, yeah. Yes, he had a beautiful giant RV, like 40 feet long. It was like a house, and they treated him really well, and you have to really, because this is a person on the set for 80 hours a week minimum, and so they have to have somewhere they can go and get away from all the noise, all the chaos that is a set, and you just collect your wits and get your head in the game. So he had it was like a house on wheels, and the rest of the cast had these they called honey wagons, and they're just nothing special at all, just somewhere to go to sit down and look at your lines. It's like a box that might have air conditioning. But he was treated very well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how about after the all the you could say usual work was done? Was there any soundstage after synchronization taking place with you coming in and reading your lines again? Do you remember if that was also part of the job?
Yes, because when you shoot everything on location, the way that show did most of their things, when you're outside, the sound is hard to control. There'd be planes overhead, birds chirping, maybe that weren't supposed to be chirping there, and we had to do a lot of what they called looping. So I hated looping. I still do, because you go in and there's this big screen, and they're playing the scene, and then you hear 3 beeps, and it comes to your part, and the minute you hear the third, it goes boop, 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 and the minute you hear the last one, you have to start talking and trying to match your lips. And that's not so bad, but having to recreate whatever emotion you might have had during that scene is so hard to do because you don't have the other actor there. You're actually parroting. You're parroting what was meant to be heard. So I have always loathed looping because and so much of it is looped anytime we were outside. So yeah, we had a lot of that. And it was also really cool because back then at Universal Studios, they had an orchestral room, and they would have the show up on this big screen, or the movie they were doing. And there was an entire orchestra there and the conductor, and they would score it live. And I used to go to the Universal Studios to see David on days off that I had. But before I went to the set, I would always go to that magical room where this giant orchestra was, and they would be scoring a big movie. It was Universal Studios. And I think that it did something to me musically because if you've ever just sat in a room with an orchestra, it's chilling. It is so magnificent. You never get to do it. So I went there a lot because I love that.
Okay. We have to hear a bit about Edward Mulhare as well. I know we touched on him in our last talk as well. But how was your relationship to Edward?
Always warm and always close and always connected. He was, like a father figure to me for sure. So interesting, my father figures that I've been given. God gave me really great father figures as a young performer because, I left home when I was really young, and my parents were divorced when I was really young, and as many people's are. And, very hard. My dad was a wonderful man, but he was emotionally absent and physically absent. So it wasn't that he didn't love me, but a lot of people have trouble expressing themselves verbally and physically, so not having a lot of that, and just giving me advice about life. He was really busy, and so when I would meet somebody later in life, and when I say later, I mean late teens, early 20s, and I could feel this attachment without anything else to it except a genuine care for me as a human being. There was no weirdness to it. I had that with Evel Knievel because I worked for him when I was really young as an assistant. And he, I think, was very instrumental in my entire life, my courage, my personality. I mean, my fearlessness, I think that I got from him. And then when Edward Mulhare kind of took that role over, he was very father figure-like to me. And he was just, I watched him growing up, on TV, in movies, and The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. And so, I had such respect for him as a human being and as a performer. And we were just incredibly close, always were, for the entire 4 years. He was who I gravitated to. And he's just a wonderful man, really great. Yeah.
So we're at the Arden Villa now, also one of the iconic Knight Rider locations. I think only used for 4 episodes actually. But you were lucky enough to be there. Any memories from this magnificent place?
Yes, this is a mansion in Pasadena. I don't think I ever knew the name of the mansion, but it does have a name, and a lot of films and television shows are shot at this location. I recognize it all the time when I'm watching a movie, and I'll say, oh, it's the mansion in Pasadena. And so it was also a really beautiful place. And then you'll see the outside when Edward and Devon and Stevie are out. So when Devon takes him outside, I think right now, they go and they walk by this unbelievable pool / pond. And I think that he'll say, that Devin actually talks to him about how he can't tell Stevie who he is, and because it would put me in danger. And so, it was like, put her in danger. So that mansion, just spectacular all the way around, 360. And that being said, there was also a little bit of a creepy feeling, like almost like the place was haunted, at least to me. And I'm super sensitive about stuff. So I was thinking, what is that I feel, so there was a little bit of I wouldn't want to spend the night there. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. How did that work? Was that so close to Universal that you would go home and sleep overnight, or would you have a hotel room close to Arden Villa? I'm not that familiar with the geographics of LA.
No, we'd go home. I mean, because you never stayed in a hotel because everything was within an hour and a half of home, and so yes, you just go home at night. Everybody would go home. Maybe if I put a crew up, and here's why. Because the crew has to be there all the time, all the way from the beginning, all the way to the very end. The actors might not. So the crew might have a very short turnaround, which they often did. And so they only had maybe 5 hours before they had to be back at it again. And so they would put them in a hotel, but we always got to go home, yes.
How much of the stunt scenes in this episode did you see? Was that simply a second unit doing it, or were you involved in any of it? We get to a scene now where there's a lot of shooting with you in the car. How much were you involved?
In this episode, I used to go watch the stunts on episodes that I was not in because I love stunt work. It's so intricate and so scientific, and so I loved it. But this, no, because everything that they're doing is second unit. Otherwise, you would never be able to get a show done in 5 or 6 days. So I didn't see any of the stunts on this episode. And the stunts actually, by the time season 4 came around, they started working with miniatures and things like that because they were trying to save money. So the first 2 years and 3 years, they would do stunts if they were absolutely necessary. And then sometimes they would move to miniatures and I would be like, look, you can see Mattel on the bottom of the car because it was so ridiculously obvious to me. But yeah, I didn't see any of the stunts in this episode.
No. So you weren't involved in this. You were just sitting in the car and
yep.
No shooting taking place while you were there.
No.
Okay. So, yeah. If we talk a bit about you on screen, did you have any say in for example, your wardrobe, or was that just assigned to you and it's take it?
Well, Karen Braverman was the wardrobe person, and I never questioned anything. I just, unless it's something that has to do with the character, as far as I didn't feel like that's not my home. My home was the soap opera that I worked on, Capitol, at the time. It was a wonderful, amazing show. And, if I didn't feel comfortable in something, I felt a little more okay to say so and ask if there was any other choices. And of course, not being a diva, because who needs that? But I really, when I was on a show like this or Airwolf or other shows that I was guest starring on, especially because I always seemed to be like a special guest star. It was for a premiere episode. I felt so incredibly lucky and blessed just to be invited there. And but I would never go to somebody else's house and tell them how to put the furniture in the living room. And that's pretty what that would have been like, in my opinion. Yeah. So no, I never said a word about my wardrobe, whether I liked it or not.
How did that work for you? Did you get a week off on Capitol, or how did that work?
I would get 4 weeks a year vacation time on Capitol. So because I worked 50 weeks a year, I was one of the lead characters on that show. So I was on set often 5 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week, shooting. And so but I had 4 weeks a year off of vacation time. So every single week I had off for vacation time, I would use to do a guest starring role on a show. And so I never had vacation, but it's okay because he didn't really, honestly, for him to go on a vacation, he couldn't go to normal places. His fame at this point was so huge. He was so well known and so popular that I remember one day he said, "What are you doing today?" And I said, "Oh, we're going to go to Disneyland later. Do you want to come with us?" It was myself and some friends. And he just looked at me like, "I can't go to Disneyland." And he was right, because he's 6'5", absolutely drop dead gorgeous. And, he was a beacon. You couldn't miss him. You couldn't disguise him. So at this point, he was so famous that I understood that he wouldn't have a minute's peace. So I didn't ever say, "Oh, you never come with us." I mean, what's the point of that? So we didn't really go on vacations, and he would often go to another country and go singing and, do concerts and things like that. But I couldn't do that because I was working at home. And, so we, it's not a wonder to me that a lot of relationships don't make it in this business, because it's so demanding. And when you have two people with full careers together, it's not easy, to make a go of it. So you do your best and it works out, or it doesn't. And you have to also be mature when that moment comes where it doesn't, and let a person go be who they are and what they need to do. So that's why I think it takes extraordinary people to be married in this business.
So we're
two extraordinary people.
Yeah. We're at the ending scene now. Very, very, very emotional.
Yes.
Yeah. For Knight Rider.
Yeah.
We'll get to see Michael equally emotional in the next 2 episodes that you are in. But besides that, this is really this is really the height of it.
Even without sound, as I watch this, I have goosebumps up and down my arms, because I remember this moment so well. And I was so immersed in the character, I think he was too, that there was no sense of myself at all. I felt every bit what the audience would be feeling right now watching it. I believed every second of it. And I did not know how absolutely iconic this one moment that's about to come up would become. And I actually have it on my wall in a portrait hanging in the house right now, not this one. But I remember this moment, and I remember looking at him and thinking how great he did here. And then when he steps away, and then I look out the back window, and here comes the moment where everyone remembers this right there, that moment. So at the wrap party, the producers and the crew, but I think it was the producers, had that picture frozen and made a big portrait out of it, and everybody signed it. Everybody on the crew and cast signed it, and they gave it to me as a gift at the end of the show, and it hangs in my house to this day. Sadly, all the signatures have faded, but as a matter of fact, let me just do this. So this is something that I have. These are postcards, and so these are postcards of me from the 80s and the 90s in different parts of my career, and my poster and things like that. And these postcards, there's me in Les Mis, but I just wanted to show this because one of my shots better be, it better be, well, there's me and Kit.
Oh, yeah.
But see, and that's in my garage actually. But one of the postcards, I think maybe it didn't make it to this cut, but that still shot that we're talking about is going into the next one. I'm going to do the one for Knight Rider, because when I go and do these events, so these are postcards that you can tear off and send them if you want, or I sign them. And then there's my family now, as Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, my husband Todd, and myself on my wedding day. So that picture of in the car, that will be in the next set of postcards that I have made, because it's so iconic. And if you show that to a Knight Rider fan, they know exactly what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly. At this point, were there any plans to bring you back in Let It Be Me? Do you remember?
What's he looking at right there? What's he looking?
He's looking at the necklace. The
this was a huge moment here.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. Because you left it for him so that he would
let him know that I knew.
You knew, exactly. Yeah.
I have goosebumps everywhere right now.
Yeah.
Because I actually forgot about this moment.
Yeah.
And no, we did not know I would be coming back for the next season, because you see what he said? He's dead now. Yeah. But he knew that she knew.
Yeah.
At that moment, because she left him that necklace. Yeah. And that necklace Michael Long had given to her. Yeah. So she left it for him to let him know, I know who you are, and I know what you have to do. Yeah. And she went into the witness protection program, and he's like accepting his life as it is without her. And he's Michael Knight once again, put back together. So that scene, I forgot about it, but I have goosebumps all up and down my neck right now, because I remember how great that writing was. Virginia Aldridge kicked ass on that script. She really did, like the nuances like that. So good. I'm so happy we got to do this, because it took me on a really great trip down memory lane. So great.
It's been it's been fantastic. I still have a couple of questions, Catherine.
Sure. We're on our date.
Yeah, we're on a date. Exactly. We're on a.
So it's your time.
Yeah, we're on a virtual reunion date. Isn't that correct?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, fantastic. First of all, you mentioned just a bit about you return in season 2. Let It Be Me. You have a singing career. Were you on stage with David during his singing career? Because I remember I had this our first night together. I had that. On a single, on a maxi single, actually, I think I was able to find it in Denmark many years ago, and you're singing in that song as well. Were you on stage with David during his music career?
Oh, did I ever do it live? You mean in any of his concerts? No, I never ever got to see him in concert, because he did them all in Europe. Yeah. And I never could get time off from my show. When you're a lead on a show, and you just can't, so I never got to see him do that. Also, I think things had started to fall apart around that time. And so, it was just really on a personal level, difficult time. Yeah. And but I wouldn't have been able to go regardless, because I wouldn't have had the time. So I would hear about it and watch the videos and all that sort of thing. But no, I never sang on stage with him outside of Knight Rider on the set, except we did a few telethons together. Yeah. And we did the album together with Joel Diamond. So, his Night Rocker was his album. And so I recorded with him for that.
Yeah.
Let It Be Me and whatever other songs I was on there for. I still have the platinum album on my wall in the other room.
Oh, brilliant! I have the CD as well. Yeah. So, yeah.
I didn't know they made a CD out of that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. I have it. I think final question in regards to Knight Rider. You were also with David when the show got cancelled.
Yes.
Do you remember how big of a surprise was that? How did the cast react? Any stories regarding the days around it? Because it's like, well, in normal life, if you have a normal job, you can get fired from that job, and that is not a very good situation.
No, any time you lose your job, if you love what you do, or you need your job, it's horrific. And it's not just that someone loses a TV show. It's all the same. If you love it and you need it, then you lose it. And I mean, that we all know that feeling. All of us. There's no one out there that doesn't know this feeling. It's a horrible feeling. You feel lost. You feel empty. You feel frightened. you wonder if you're going to get another job, if you'll ever be that happy again. There's so many things that go through your mind when you lose a job that you love and you need. And I remember it like it was yesterday because it was a phone call, and he was home and I was home. I had a day off and I was home. And the phone call came in around 4:00 in the afternoon, and I remember where he was sitting, and I remember him picking the phone up, and I remember him saying, his voice was just stunned because the show was a hit. Yeah. And so, it was just a shocking thing. And then I remember him hanging up, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he told me. And I was speechless, because when you are so tied to a character, he poured his heart and soul into that character for 4 seasons. That's a good run. But when you go into the 5th season is where all the big money is, because your syndication deal is just huge. And it really wasn't about the money. I knew at that moment that he was probably going to go through a lot, because, and I was sensitive to that, because when you pour yourself into a character to that extent, and that's what your identity is, your very being and identity is tied into being that character, not to just this country, but to the entire world, then you have to understand losing it, even though reruns go on, but you aren't ever going to put his skin on again. Think about that. You're not going to ever step into the shoes again, that skin again, and how devastating that is for a performer, for an actor in particular. And so it was I watched it. My heart was broken for him. And, I'm a girl of faith, so I believe that when a door closes, a window opens, and sometimes God drags us kicking and screaming into a better life than we can imagine for ourselves. But we have to be present for that to happen. We have to do our part, show up, be present, be smart enough to know when you're being blessed. And so I wasn't worried about him getting another job, although what happens is that he got so typecast because he was so much of that character. And I think he would say the same thing. I remember his agent, somebody was casting something, and they said that they wanted a David Hasselhoff type. And he said, "Well, I am David Hasselhoff." You know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing that an actor goes through when they're typecast so much to a character. So they wanted someone that looked like him or had his popularity, but they didn't want to hire him for that particular thing, and how frustrating that was. And so, yeah, my heart broke for him, because I understood that was going to be a very devastating loss. And I think, that it took a long time to get over it. So by the time he got Baywatch, I was living in Europe, actually. I lived in Italy for 2 years. And so, to watch him be able to recreate that success again was very wonderful, because I knew that he would, feel like he was home again, like he had something that he was such a huge part of it. So, on both sides of it. So that was very, very good. But I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was such a devastating phone call. Yeah. And who knows why, we'll never really know, really, so why that show was canceled.
Catherine, it's been fantastic watching Whitebird with you. You have such a fantastic memory regarding things that happened 40 years ago. So I want to thank you so much for doing this. It's been fantastic. It's been wonderful, and I hope that we'll of course talk again later.
Oh my gosh, Jacob, we're joined at the hip. You and I connected right away. You're going to be a friend of mine for life. I know it, and know you already are. And I want to thank you for bringing me to the audience and to me, and you to me. So thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.